So they get on the bandstand, Fats is sitting down, and Chevy starts his little waiting for ships that never come in, you know. Watching them waiting in vain. Fats is supposed to play here. While he says, say, look, what's that in the distance? Well, those are not my ships. Well, when Fats started playing, Chevy said, say, look, what's that in the distance? Fats says, where? Sit down, fool. Fats done forgot what he was supposed to do, you know. Say, look, what's that? And then Fats stood up and had his guitar down and said, where? Looked up at the door, you know.
So we're gonna get a bunch more Shelley stories, and they can go on all night. But you're playing with him, and then I know you played with him for a while, and he decided to disband, so to speak. Then you went to work. Talk about the bands you worked with after you worked with him. Now I know he fired you several times.
Yeah, he did. For really reasons I couldn't help. Yeah, he was something else. He fired me a couple times and hired me back the next day, you know. But one of them was the PA. Well, he was dyed in the wool. The show must go on.
Yeah.
You know, he'd come back in the 20s and no period of this plays and vaudeville days and all that kind of stuff. So, and all kinds of weird things that they thought of back then. Like one of them, he told me, he said, don't ever, if you ever hear anybody whistling a Sweet Bunch of Daisies before a show, stop them. Sweet Bunch of Daisies. It's just sweet, it's a song. He said it's a Jonah. He called it.
Jonah.
Yeah. And what's this about? He said, well, because one time in Dallas or Fort Worth, the show was going on, and there was a guy back there whistling Sweet Bunch of Daisies, and the show burned down. So don't ever, that's a Jonah, don't ever.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, I'll never will whistle Sweet Bunch of Daisies for the show. So, anyway, the show must go on. So
somebody must have been whistling for every one of his shows.
Anyway, we start to play at the YWCA in Beaumont. And once a week deal, like on Friday night. Back then it was an older, today they'd probably call them senior citizens. So it was in a gymnasium, which didn't have a bandstand, so we're playing there. There's about a 5-piece band. And right in the middle of the dance, well, we never had very good equipment playing with him. And the PA set went out. And most bands, that would shut them down. Not him. The PA set went down, he reached over on the stand and he folded up a sheet of music and walked out into the dance floor and sang through this like a megaphone, and he was following people around singing. And we're still up here on the bandstand playing, and the show had to go on, that's all it was. So the sheet of music became a megaphone like Rudy Valley, and he was out there following people around singing through it, you know. And I'll never forget the experience with him. It was, the next time he got me was at the Winter Garden, and we had about a 6-piece band, and we had a little bogan PA set. Had a turntable on the top. You could see all there, and had to ventilate it, had a lot of openings in it, and tubes all there, all lit up and everything, and I'm playing the mandolin, and we're right in the middle of the dance at the Winter Garden, which was a pretty big place, and I smelled something's burning, and I looked over at the PA set, and the transformer was melting. And of course, the PA went out, the mic quit, and I'm seeing it melted from down to the bottom, the whole transformer, and he turned around to me and he said, fix it. What? Fix it. I said, man, I can't fix it, it's burned and laying down. Well, then you're fired. Well, I guess by golly I'm fired, so I got up and got my mandolin and started off the bandstand. When I did, everybody in the band followed me. They all knew he'd done the wrong thing, which was 3 other guys. And when I went out the door, Shane Kennedy was the only guy on the bandstand up there with an aluminum bass. And Shelley with a fiddle and no PA set. People trying to dance. And I went out the door, that's the shape they was in, and 3 of the guys followed me because they knew he'd done wrong by me. And it was hilarious, and of course it didn't last but 2 or 3 days. And he had to hire me back because he got word that Poncho and the farmhands was trying to hire me, and that was his competition over there, he felt.
Now what was Poncho's real name?
his last name was Parks, and he came down there from East Texas just before World War II started. And he came down there, they said, and he had a bass with fishing cards on it for strings, trot lines. He would take and rosin the strings up, and couldn't afford to buy strings, and he had fishing cards on an upright bass for strings. And Pancho hit town before I moved over there. I used to listen to him on the radio, but he was cleaning up there for a while. He put a band together, and on Saturday night, sometimes he'd book as many as 3 and 4 dances in that area and have a band at every one of them. And I was in one of them. He hired me and Shelley to play in one of his bands before Shelley got his band together. And we'd play over in Port Arthur, and I played banjo, and he paid me $3 for Saturday night. And he'd have a band at the Harvest Club, he'd have a band at the Winter Garden, he'd have a band in Orange, he'd put a band up in Silsbee, and had all these guys on salary, and he'd rake in all the money, see.
Now this is World War II going on.
Yeah.
So you got bands play every night.
Bands everywhere you could
Radio
play.
programs every day.
There was probably Port Arthur, Beaumont was probably supporting about 6 or 7 bands, and Houston, I don't know how many. Every place had a band in it, maybe from 2 to 7 or 8 piece bands. There was no television. People were making good money to shipyards and defense plants and refineries and so forth, and they wanted to go somewhere to spend it. And of course they'd listen to these radio shows, you know, and the hottest item over there, of course, was Cliff Brunner and Moon Bogan. They was the hottest, and after a while they folded Poncho up. They kind of run him out of business.
Now didn't he have wasn't Poncho had money to buy a bunch of instruments?
Yeah, he had a trailer out in his front yard. He lived not far from Magnolia Refinery, and you couldn't get musical instruments. And the Beaumont Music Store, run by an old fellow named McGarity, and Poncho would go down there and he would buy the instruments when they'd hit town and lock them up in that trailer, so he couldn't have no competition. If you ordered a mandolin or a PA or something, it would take you months to get it on account of the war. And when he'd come in, Poncho would go down there and buy it and lock it up in that trailer out in front, so his competition wouldn't be no competition. And that finally wore down, and he had all kind of characters in his band, you know. There was many of them. Everybody then that played thought that they could make a career out of music, and it could be their future, because you could play all the time. So all kind of guys were playing, and that they didn't do anything else, a lot of them. And a lot of them would work shipyards and then play at nights or something.
But Beaumont, Port Arthur was really hot. A good place to be if you was
you play Beaumont and Port Arthur and play over in Louisiana, other side of Lake Charles, and as far over as Houston, just working off Beaumont radio stations.
Now he fired you another time. What was PA set? What ground wire? You tell me, and what the PA said, or what was it? It was shorting out, and you was trying to cut it back.
Yeah, that was a rehearsal we was going to do, and it was my mandolin, and the jack that goes into the amplifier, you know, then had 2 little screws and had a main wire and a ground, and sometime that little wire would break, and you had to peel the wire back and separate the 2. They couldn't touch. If they did, it short out, wouldn't play. And it's a tedious little job, and I was peeling that ground back, and you don't want this wire, and he was impatient. He just, give me that. He grabbed it and just, now. Naturally, it's not going to work. Every day, well, I could tell a story on him, not from the band point, but I lived in the house with him, you know. So the band thing and living in the house with him, then when I didn't, I was still with him plumbing up the time he passed away. So he never tried to be funny, as you know, but everything worked that way.
Yeah, I know we'd agree. He's the funniest human being we ever knew.
It was.
Inspector Clouseau was amateur compared
he was
to
like Ned Spark compared to him.
I got some stories I want you to tell him later, and one of them, as you know, relates to Troy. 2 of the first things you ever saw.
Yeah.
And one of them was with Troy.
Yeah.
In that radio program. But you would get out of school and go down and listen to other radio programs. Go down and sit in and watch other radio programs, right?
Yeah.
Okay, like Cliff and different ones.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and of course I was playing then too, you know, and we would go to Port Arthur. I'd go down to KRIC and listen to Poncho and the Farmhands and Eddie and Pearl, who George Jones started that with, which was a little bit later. But a lot a lot of guys played on KRIC radio, and
So how did you get in with playing with Cliff?
well, I got to going around so much where they were, and when I'd come around, well, John Wallace was the bass player. And when I'd come around, well, John would want me to come sit in on bass. John was a good player, but he's kind of lazy, and he'd want me to get up and play bass, even when he was with Moon before that. So when I'd come in, I couldn't wait to get out there, and he'd have me up and sit in on upright bass, which is all there was, you know. And of course, then I got to know Cliff and these guys, and went up to visit Moon one night, and he didn't have a bass player, but he had a bass, and Moon hired me to play bass with him. Of course, I played with Moon before Cliff. I mean, as far as a playing job. And
Well, that come about the same way because you go out where they're playing and get to know them.
yeah, I'd go out there, but I'd never sit in on fiddle or anything. It was always John wanted me to sit in on bass, you know, which was okay. I was glad to get to do that because the bands were good, all of them good players.
Now, let me get kind of a little timeline here. When you went to Beaumont, you were already playing guitar. I mean, you're learning, but you're playing guitar some,
Yeah.
mandolin some. Now that would have been an 8-string mandolin at that time, right?
That's right.
Until Tiny Moore.
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you, mandolin, and then apparently some banjo, tenor banjo.
Yeah.
Played some. How did you get into bass?
You know, there was one that the Poncho and the Farmhands left their bass down at the studios usually. If they wasn't playing at night, and I'd go down there, and of course your daddy was going to show me something on it one time.
Yeah.
And I found out he didn't know anything about it. And I'd go down there and fool with that bass. Man, the strings was way up high. And watching other guys play, and of course, you know, you realized how it was tuned.
Mm-hmm.
And I like to play, and you mess your fingers all up after that trying to play fiddle or mandolin or something. But anyway, I just got to fooling with it. Nobody really ever showed me anything. But I realized how the tuning was on it, and could kind of keep that in mind.
So you started picking up fiddle when you got to Beaumont then?
Yeah, but not right then. I sticking with mandolin. I couldn't play any fiddle. I didn't start fiddling with fiddle until I went with Lee Bay on the Blue Bonnet Playboys, which was after Shelley retired.